Welcome back to the Medium Cool Show. I'm your host, Felix. We're joined with a special guest, Jake Mueller from the Cinebums podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about some Grindhouse. Do you want to tell the people what Grindhouse is?
I mean, I feel like there's a lot of broad definitions in general of what Grindhouse actually means, but to me, it's the content of the film first and foremost. I mean, being categorized in the 70s as exploitation cinema, showing parts of life and situations, largely the horror genre or action genre, that are taboo and couldn't be made in like actual studio filmmaking. So they resorted to very low budget, grimy productions and resulted in a lot of great art, if you ask me. So that's kind of like how I view it. Like, what's your definition usually?
Yeah, like exploitation films are films where they typically lower budget films that exploit things like sex, violence, and drugs in order to get an audience there because they're like spending, it's like very low budget and they're trying to make the best bang for their buck. So they have like shit like violence, like killing and blood and gore and sex. And then typically these are like B movies or, exported movies from other countries that played in like things called grindhouses, like all across America, like drive-ins or like downtown LA or like 42nd Street is like a really famous street where they played like grindhouse. They had a bunch of grindhouses. They played like exploitation cinema.
Yeah.
But I guess the first exploitation picture we're going to talk about comes from Italy.
Your favorite?
Yeah. Like literally, probably my favorite genre is Italian horror. And today we're talking about the Giallo proto-slasher Torso from 1973, directed by Sergio Martino. And I think it's a story or screenplay by Ernesto Gastaldi, who was like a really big name in like the grindhouses.
The composer, remind me his name, but also very prolific.
Oh, really? Was it Riz Ortolani?
I wish I'd looked it up, but
damn,
anyhow.
Look it up. Yeah, they can. It's someone. Fuck.
Sergio Martino, though, like, not as brought up as I feel like the main trio that is brought up so frequently was Argento, Fulci, and Bava, but judging by this and All the Colors of the Dark, like his craft and his sort of vision for the horror genre is very, very just incredibly well polished and beautiful and so influential. I remember you had said before this movie, like, this is like a foundational horror film, just in terms of not only the Giallo genre, but just contemporary slashers. Like all these sort of subgenres of horror pull from this movie. Yeah. After watching it, for sure.
Yeah, Sergio Martino is if you're familiar with like exploitation cinema or Italian horror, you would like you know him, but he's definitely not one of like the bigger names, that's for sure. But he's definitely underrated, like he's
for sure
kind of like a tier below those guys, but he's like I think a tier above like someone like Joe D'Amato or like Umberto Lenzi.
Yeah, I had the same
like
thought.
Yeah.
I think his movies are a bit more sophisticated in the sense that they're not. I mean, D'Amato and
they're more
Lenzi are way more about exploitation and just shocking content for the sake of marketing. But Martino's movies are just, it's the craft and it's the filmmaking and it's horror, really.
For sure. Like he's also like a stylist and he's like shoots really well, really creative and really like gory sequences, like very much up there with like Lucio Fulci with like some of the gore sequences, especially in this movie. But I'm a fan of him. I really like The Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward a lot.
That's a good one.
That's like a good psychosexual thriller, sexy, sleazy picture.
His movies are highly sexualized. I mean,
they're sleazy, but they're like classy at the same time.
They are. I mean, the opening of this film is like, it's almost this experimental art piece of just exposing you immediately to your relationship to these same sex sort of interactions and how it plays in later to the characters.
Yeah.
And like I wouldn't even put it as exploitative, but it's almost just, it's an art piece, and that's what I view Martino and even like Mario Bava to a certain extent. Like their movies are just, they're art installations first and foremost to me, just the way that they're shot and like this type of content that is introduced in them.
Yeah, for sure. Like in the time, these movies were written off as exploitation, like B movie, like trash. But looking at them now, they're really, really artistic. They're like held to a higher regard. But when they're making these movies, they're just like, oh yeah, let's just like make them and like fucking like try to sell. You know what I mean? Because they made so many of these movies. But Torso is a standout, and I think you kind of tapped into why. I mean, it was like it really was ahead of its time. Like a lot of stuff you see in this, you can see in like John Carpenter movies and shit
Black
like
Christmas.
That.
I directly compared it to Black Christmas because there's this. It's self-contained to these girls who are like holed up in this house, at least when they're like sort of on the run from this killer.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, more or less in American film, that would be the whole like framework of the movie. It's like college girls being sort of bombarded by these killers, but like this movie has a lot more like religious allegories and their relationship to the professor and all these fascinating things on top of that. So that's what really makes it more Italian influence more than the American, but you still see its imprint on just so many films to come after, as we said before.
Yeah, it is a giallo. It is a giallo, and I think this is the first giallo I've talked about since starting the show, which is really exciting, and it really tickles my fancy because I love the giallo, and this one is a very unique giallo, and it hits all the points of a giallo. You know, like this sort of like traumatized killer with a psychosexual traumatized past.
Yeah, like one moment to sort of define his madness, sort of, and it's always like revealed in this very just
at the end, like the last 10 minutes. Yeah. Like all it's exploitation, like the exposition of like who the killer is, but it follows this group of like really, really beautiful college girls. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they're a little older than college, but they're like these like really gorgeous college girls who are taking like, I guess, art, religion. They're like art students or something, and
theology mixed with art, and like which plays into the thematics obviously later on.
And they live. It's in a beautiful town. I don't know where the fuck the town is, bro, but somewhere in Italy. It's just like the most gorgeous,
absolutely gorgeous
town. And basically, what starts happening is these college girls are starting to get killed like one by one. By a masked killer, and he has an obsession like with like gouging their eyes out, and we get like a lot of these like gouging eyes like fucking sequences, very Fulci-esque. And these, I love the kill sequences in this movie, like the build up, the execution, like the whole mood, the atmosphere, incredible,
extremely methodical and patient, I would say.
Yeah.
Like, there's this scene that you and I think our jaws were pretty dropped when she's in the forest and this swampy area.
Yeah.
And it's like a very like unique set piece for a giallo film, in my opinion. Like I'd never seen anything quite like it, and it preys on like your biggest fears of like the unknown in this sort of forestry area, and like the way that kill is executed is one of my favorite, I think,
it's really good
sequences in any giallo film I've ever seen, and I think that's the main thing I'll remember from this movie overall. But like with a string of really incredible kill sequences too. Like the car scene is another one with that weird devilish guy who's sort of like creeping on all these college girls. I'm not quite sure who his character was, but that scene is incredibly like upsetting and gory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just the way, and also like when the way he kills them, he like fucking will like get them on the ground and then fucking open up their shirts so you'll see their like boobs, and then he like stabs them after he just like it's always like a boob shot that's in there, and then like he fucking like stabs them to death basically and gouges their eyes out. It starts like this investigation, and basically halfway through the movie the girls that are still alive realize like, oh, there's like this killer after us, we got to go seclude ourselves in a house far away. But the house is literally
on
like
top
just
of a mountain, like overlooking the town.
It's literally just right, you can see it from the town, like where they go to hide, and like everyone knows that they're there. The killer knows that they're there and shit.
Pretty silly in the sense, though. I feel like Martino did that just so he could have these really grandiose shots of like, especially towards the end when the last girl, the final girl, I guess you'd call her, is in trouble, and you have these amazing sort of wide shots to that kind of morph into like close-ups. So the geography of this movie is incredible because like you have this final set piece up on the hill, and everything's sort of taking place like with each other, and it's just like in conjunction. It's so well orchestrated. This movie feels big compared to a lot of giallo films too, like in budgetary and just the themes it tackles, the characters. It feels bigger than a lot of giallo, especially other Martino films too. So it was really cool to see that.
Yeah, And a thing that I also was noticed, this is like an early 70s Giallo, so we're getting the sort of the latter end of the sort of counterculture movements.
Yeah, you did mention that.
So we have these like this like sort of hippie convent, and there we had like a lot of hippies, and you kind of see this in his other films like Strange Vice of Miss Ward and Your Vice is a Locked Room, and also recently we watched A Lizard in a Woman's Skin from 1971, directed by Lucio Fulci, and that also has the same sort of counterculture type vibe. So we're getting like a lot of like layers of like kind of classy Italian stuff. And then we have like more lurid, I guess, dirtier kind of hippie type shit. I don't know if they're like necessarily, I think the hippies are kind of, I don't know. They like really, they're not depicting them in the best way, but also like, it's like such a big part of these films too.
I think it's that classic Italian like separation from American hippie subculture. And they're trying to comment on it, so it's like a very like skewed foreign. I mean, obviously there was hippie subculture in Italy, but I feel like the grander commentary is a little broad because they were just kind of like, oh, like this is what young people are sort of morphing into, and a lot of them were using that as commentary for their characters and all this stuff. And also, I think there was the orgy scene in the bar, and is very counterculture like imagery when everyone's just having sex, and it's very like Italians are very, a lot of them are like have this weird sexual repression that they inject into like their horror movies.
Yeah, you know. Well, it's like an exploitation film, so they got to have sex and boobs in there to like actually make the film. Right. So I guess that's like part of it, like just like a bunch of boobs and ass and sex that like you would never see today.
I think they genuinely are like very fascinated though, or how sex and violence are sort of in a way just morphed together in terms of public perception, and then mirroring them together in their films is very prevalent in a lot of Italian horror. And I think that's just like their two number one fascinations for like to even craft these stories. And you could just you can write it off as horny, but horny cinema.
Definitely, yeah.
I do see it as a way for them to sort of just express certain thoughts they have about this. Our viewpoints on that stuff. So.
Yeah, not to say they weren't horny.
Yeah, I think they probably were too.
They were horny, but also they had to put it in there to like sell the shit.
Sell the movie.
There's some directors that are horny and they don't even need to be horny. Like these sort of like art house directors, you know?
Yeah, there's plenty you could think of.
But talking about like the latter half of the film, whether these girls are all locked in this house, that's where like the real influence comes in with like Friday the 13th and like,
oh my god,
and shit. It's totally like takes from that,
but 5 times more graphic than either of those because he's literally chopping them up.
Yeah. I guess he's like collecting body parts or something, right?
Yeah, it's not necessarily explained why he's chopping them up as maybe just to dispose, but again, it's just very sensationalist imagery that you would see, not normally see in American cinema. So it stands out more to us for sure.
Yeah, I guess. Should we talk about like the ending? Give like a little spoiler warning.
Yeah,
I definitely want to talk about the ending
for sure. Let's do it.
Yeah, so we're gonna talk about the final reveal here. So if you haven't seen Torso and you're at this part of the video and you want to, go see it without being spoiled, then go see it because we're going to talk about spoilers in 3, 2, 1. So
we're going to talk about like his motivations, I guess.
We're going to talk about So at the end, so the killer is revealed to be the teacher in the end, and we kind of get a little bit of because like these Italian giallos, they kind of throw little red herrings at you from every now and then, and like some of the red herrings, and in this case, there's actually like a real hint close to the beginning of the movie where this guy is like laying with a prostitute, but she's making fun of him. The teacher's laying with a prostitute, and
I didn't think about that.
She's making fun of him because he can't get it up. He's like, oh, it's always the weirdos that are fucking like blah blah blah. And that's like a little like that's supposed to be like a little like pay attention to this, and kind of like throws you. And then when the movie goes on, we get other red herrings, and there's like the friend and like the milk guy and other people like that. But it's revealed that
forgot about that.
Yeah. So there's like kind of like this was the second time I watched it, so I guess I caught it.
That was my first time.
Yeah. So, I don't think I would have maybe caught it, but that would like stood out to me watching it again.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, but basically the whole reveal is that when the teacher was a kid, he was playing on like a cliff with a doll there. And then his brother went to go reach for a doll at the edge of a cliff, but the brother flew off. And like died. To his death. Yeah. So that's what his trauma was. And then I guess there's a sexual thing to it too. Did you get that?
Yeah.
Like the thing with the doll, do you know what that meant?
Not necessarily.
He was literally traumatized because his brother fell off, and then he got like I guess I don't know where the sexual vibe comes.
I thought there was elements maybe of sexual abuse implied, maybe, and
he started mutilating dolls,
and then maybe I thought he felt somewhat guilty of his brother's death in that sense. That was just my read on it at first.
The reason, but the motives for these series of murders were that he was having sex with his students, and the students took pictures of him having sex with him, so they started blackmailing him. So then he decided to kill those first two students. Then he kept on being eyewitnesses of the friends, so he had to keep killing the friends and stuff.
Yep. I think the underlying meaning of all of it, though, because like it is that sex, he couldn't get it up, and
he was guilty about it.
Because there's that scene in the car where there's two college students are having sex, and it kind of mirrors his experience with a prostitute where he couldn't get it up, like this kind of secretive sexual encounter, and he murders those two people. Yeah. That was my biggest read. His motivations from his past felt to me a little more thrown in as an afterthought, but it was more a commentary to me on this sexual repressive nature of, this man and like how trauma can even play into that. So
and it kind of harkens back to it all comes back from Psycho from 1960. It's true. It's always we get an explanation at the end of like what like this guy's disorder is and why he kills, and that's a big staple in the Giallo.
I think I've been watching Giallo for years now, and I was ashamed I hadn't seen this, but if you're trying to get into Italian horror, like this is like a perfect introduction.
Yeah.
There's like 5 or 10 films you could probably name, but I think this is so accessible to anyone who's just not as familiar with Giallo. Because like it's very foundational, it's easy to follow for the most part. The style, it's not overly stylish as compared to other ones that might be more like abstract. So I think this is a very palatable, but at the same time, very, very just masterfully crafted and just totally perfect horror film.
Yeah,
I think it's a damn near perfect movie.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the better Giallos. I think when I first started getting into Giallo, I was watching the best of the best first. So when I watched this near the beginning of my like Giallo journey, I think I kind of wrote it off a little bit.
Sure.
And then I watched so many Giallos that I realized like how good this actually was compared to like a lot of the bullshit that like I've been watching recently.
That's so true.
And like going back and rewatching these other ones, like you're like, holy shit, this is actually really good.
I've had that experience. But like Deep Red by Argento was another one that I'd watch early on.
Yeah.
I was like, that was good. And then later on I rewatched it. Like this is like one of the epitome of what Giallo is, Blood and Black Lace is another one.
And like Suspiria, like just Italian horror in general. But
of course,
definitely this is one of quintessential Giallos, super influential. I think I saw a list of like top slasher movies. I forgot the publication. But they had it like number 6 of like all time like fucking slashers, dude. Which makes sense because it is like kind of like really influential. Like if you watch this, you're gonna see like just straight up imagery from like Halloween, straight up imagery from that.
Yeah, and in Friday the 13th franchise you were talking about, like this is
like definitely a Bay of Blood in this.
Bay of Blood,
and then like Deep Red for sure. Like you'll
there's quite a few that have just spiraled other horror filmmakers and spiraled their creativity. I feel like. I do wrestle with the idea, like, I don't know if all those American horror filmmakers had watched Giallo prior to making their films, or was it coincidental? Like,
I don't think it was.
I half of me thinks so, and the other half, because I like romanticize a lot of the really good 80s and 90s or 70s and 80s slashers that I love.
I just think there's like such like the imagery is so similar. Like there's shots in this, and there's literally shots in Deep Red. Where it's like the same like composition, like the same shit of Michael Myers, bro. It's like the same like stalking type shit.
That's true.
I think he had to have seen it, bro. I think
that's
he
fair.
Had to. Like it was just fine, dude.
It's fine. Most directors they steal from the best,
Yeah, I think he watched. I think he watched those exploitation. I think he liked those exploitation. I think John Carpenter liked those exploitation movies more than he liked the sort of like mainstream art house.
Of course,
there's like interviews of him like shitting on like Robert Altman and shit, like, and I think he likes the sort of more fun type shit,
That's fair. Yeah, I always thought it was fascinating because like that was the 70s. It was happening so rapidly, and these new just techniques were being introduced, and people point to Carpenter and Hitchcock and like Wes Craven, but you look at Italian horror, like all of
Dude,
them
it's so ahead of its time, bro. It's so ahead of its
yeah.
time. But
even like the craft, you see, like any modern horror movie you watch now, it's like they kind of string back to these movies in some way, in my opinion. So
yeah, but it's an acclimated taste too, for sure.
Of course,
I like the Italian stuff just because of the style more than like because I just watched In the Mouth of Madness or whatever, and I wasn't like that big on it. But anyway, make sure you like and subscribe, and let me know what giallos you fuck with down below. Peace.